The world often overlooked Lily. 8 years old, with eyes the color of a summer sky after a soft rain, she moved through life like a whisper, her small frame barely disturbing the air around her. She was a child carved from quiet courage and an almost painful well of empathy, a soul too gentle for the sharp edges of the world. Her home, a small, faded house on the edge of town, sagged with the weight of forgotten dreams. Her mother, a woman worn thin by endless shifts at the diner, battled a silent, relentless war against bills that piled higher than Lily's own head. The house itself seemed to breathe a sigh of quiet despair, its paint peeling like sun-scorched skin, its porch steps groaning under the lightest touch. The very air inside felt heavy with unspoken worries, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of their lives. Lily often felt like a ghost, unseen in the bustling school hallways, unheard in the clamor of the playground. Her clothes, always clean but a little too worn, a little too mended, marked her as different. The other children, with their bright new shoes and their laughter that echoed like bells, seemed to exist in a world she could only gaze at from a distance. Loneliness was a familiar shadow, stretching long behind her, even on the sunniest days. Her only true companion, a tattered, one-eyed rabbit named Thumper, bore silent witness to her quiet meals and her solitary games. Her small lunchbox, a faded plastic rectangle adorned with cartoon characters whose smiles seemed to mock her own somber reality, often held the same meager contents: a single, thin sandwich, its crusts carefully trimmed, and an apple that had seen better days. It wasn't much, but it was all her mother could spare, a testament to her unending struggle. Lily understood, with a wisdom far beyond her years, that every bite was a small victory, every meal a tiny triumph against the encroaching tide of scarcity. One blustery Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the wind seemed to bite at your exposed skin, Lily found herself at the gas station on the edge of town. Her mother, her face etched with exhaustion, had needed to fill their ancient, sputtering car before her next shift. Lily sat patiently in the passenger seat, tracing patterns on the fogged window, lost in her own quiet world. The gas station, a beacon of flickering neon against the gray sky, was a place of transient faces. Travelers passed through, their lives intersecting for mere moments before diverging again onto the endless ribbon of the highway. Lily watched them, a silent observer of humanity's ceaseless motion. Then she saw him. He sat slumped against the brick wall of the convenience store, his formidable frame somehow diminished by the cold. A leather jacket, thick and scarred like ancient armor, was pulled tight around him, but it clearly wasn't enough. His face, a landscape of hard lines and shadows, was weathered and gaunt, his eyes holding a distant, almost hollow look. A heavy, chrome-laden motorcycle, a beast of metal and power, lay on its side nearby, a silent testament to a journey interrupted. He looked like a statue carved from granite, unyielding and stern, yet there was a tremor in his hands, a subtle shiver that betrayed his vulnerability. Lily, with her innocent gaze, saw past the tattoos that snaked up his neck, past the steely glint in his eyes. She saw the hunger that gnawed at his stomach, the cold that seeped into his bones. She saw a man, alone and hurting, much like the characters in her storybooks who sometimes lost their way. Her small heart, unburdened by the world's prejudices, felt an immediate, instinctive pull of compassion. Her own sandwich, humble as it was, suddenly felt like a feast. It was a simple peanut butter and jelly, its sweetness a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside. She clutched her lunchbox, her small fingers tightening around the plastic, a silent battle raging within her. Fear, a cold whisper in her ear, urged her to stay put, to remain invisible. But a stronger voice, the voice of pure, unadulterated kindness, spoke louder. It was the voice that had always guided her, the quiet insistence that when someone needed help, you offered it, no matter how small the offering. Slowly, deliberately, Lily unbuckled her seatbelt. Her movements were hesitant, each one a silent prayer against the fear that threatened to paralyze her. Her mother, engrossed in the rhythmic thrum of the gas pump, didn't notice. Lily pushed the car door open, the sound a surprisingly loud creak in the quiet afternoon. The cold wind immediately wrapped around her, a sharp embrace that made her shiver. With her lunchbox held tightly in both hands, like a precious offering, she walked towards the imposing figure. Each step was a tiny act of courage, a defiance of the invisible barrier that society had placed between her small, innocent world and his hardened, dangerous one. The biker, his eyes fixed on some distant point, didn't seem to notice her approach until she was standing directly in front of him, her small shadow falling across his worn leather boots. He finally looked down, his gaze, sharp and piercing, falling upon her. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Surprise, perhaps, or a flash of annoyance. Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart thrumming like a trapped bird. But she held her ground, her small chin lifted in a gesture of unexpected resolve. She extended the lunchbox, her arm trembling slightly, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich nestled carefully inside. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, thin and reedy against the wind. "You look hungry," she said, the words a simple declaration of undeniable truth. "You can have my lunch." The biker's eyes, which had seen so much of the world's ugliness, widened imperceptibly. He stared at the small, outstretched hand, at the humble offering, as if it were a mirage. His face, usually a mask of stoicism, softened just a fraction. He reached out a hand, calloused and scarred, and gently took the sandwich. His fingers brushed hers, a brief, startling contact that sent a jolt through Lily. "Thank you, little one," he rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly sound, surprisingly gentle. His eyes, though still guarded, held a new depth, a hint of something profound. He didn't ask her name, didn't offer his own. It was a moment suspended in time, a silent exchange of vulnerability and compassion. Lily, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that defied the biting cold, simply nodded. She had done what she felt was right. As she turned to walk back to her mother's car, a quiet sense of accomplishment settled over her. The encounter had lasted mere moments, a fleeting ripple in the vast ocean of her life. She had given away her lunch, the sustenance her own body craved, but her spirit felt inexplicably full. She climbed back into the passenger seat, her mother still oblivious, and watched as the biker slowly, deliberately, unwrapped the sandwich. He took a bite, his eyes still fixed on her, a silent message passing between them. Lily never saw him again after that day. The memory of the encounter, already softened by the passage of time, began to recede into the quiet corners of her mind, becoming just another one of the countless small moments that shaped her young life. Her days returned to their familiar rhythm, the quiet struggle at home, the lonely walks to school, the subtle sting of being overlooked. The gas station incident became a distant echo, a faint whisper in the wind. Lily continued to navigate her world with the same quiet dignity, her small acts of kindness remaining as unseen as she often felt. The weight of her family's financial struggles pressed down, a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of their lives, coloring every decision, every small sacrifice. The faded house continued to sag, its timbers groaning in silent protest, its roof a patchwork of temporary fixes that threatened to give way with every passing storm. Her mother, her shoulders bowed under the invisible burden, continued to work tirelessly, her face a canvas of perpetual exhaustion. Meanwhile, far away from Lily's quiet corner of the world, the story of the little girl and the sandwich began its journey. The biker, whose name was Stone, the formidable leader of the Iron Brotherhood, had been deeply moved by Lily's selfless act. He had ridden many roads, seen many faces, but the pure, unadulterated kindness of that small child had pierced through the hardened shell he had built around himself. He had been stranded, his bike broken, his pockets empty, his stomach a hollow ache. He had expected indifference, perhaps even scorn, from the fleeting glances of passers-by. What he had received, Instead, was a piece of a child's heart, freely given. Back at the clubhouse, nestled deep in the rugged hills, Stone recounted the story. His voice, usually gruff and commanding, held a surprising note of reverence as he spoke of the little girl with the sky-blue eyes and the simple peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The Brotherhood, a formidable assembly of men forged by loyalty and the open road, listened in silence. Their faces, usually etched with the harsh realities of their lives, were softened by the tale. The story spread like wildfire through their network, whispered from one chapter to another, carried on the wind of roaring engines. It wasn't just a story. It was a testament to the purest form of human decency, a beacon of light in a world they often perceived as dark and unforgiving. The code of the Iron Brotherhood was simple, yet ironclad: loyalty, respect, and an unshakable belief in repaying debts, especially debts of honor. And a debt of kindness, freely given when one was at their lowest, was the most sacred debt of all. Days bled into weeks. The memory of the biker faded further for Lily, overshadowed by the more immediate, pressing concerns of her young life. School, once a place of quiet refuge, had become another source of anxiety. The bullying had started subtly, a whispered comment here, a dismissive glance there. But it had escalated, growing sharper, more insistent, like a persistent thorn in her side. A group of older children, their laughter too loud, their eyes too knowing, had singled her out. They mocked her worn clothes, her quiet demeanor, her lack of expensive toys. They would push her in the hallways, trip her on the playground, their taunts echoing in her ears long after they had moved on. Lily, small and vulnerable, bore their cruelty in silence, her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the ground. She didn't know how to fight back, didn't know how to make them stop. The burden of their unkindness pressed down on her, an invisible weight that made her small steps even heavier. One particularly brutal morning, as she walked the familiar path to school, her worn backpack feeling impossibly heavy, a wave of despair washed over her. The bullies had cornered her the day before, tearing her drawing, a careful depiction of a soaring eagle, into tiny pieces. The memory still stung, a fresh wound in her tender heart. She dreaded facing them again, the knot of fear in her stomach tightening with every step. The school building, usually a symbol of learning, now loomed like a fortress of torment. Then she heard it, a low, guttural rumble, a distant vibration that seemed to rise from the very earth beneath her feet. It started as a faint whisper on the wind, a sound she almost dismissed as a passing truck. But it grew, steadily, inexorably, into something far more profound. It wasn't a single sound. It was a symphony of power, a chorus of deep, throbbing engines. The ground itself began to tremble, a subtle tremor that vibrated up through the soles of her worn shoes. Lily paused, her small hand clutching the strap of her backpack, her brow furrowed in confusion. The sound was growing louder, closer, an insistent thrumming that filled the air, drowning out the chirping birds and the rustle of leaves. It was a sound that spoke of immense, unstoppable force, a sound that made the very air crackle with anticipation. The rumble intensified, transforming into a thunderous roar, a collective bellow that seemed to shake the very foundations of the quiet street. It was the sound of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of powerful machines, their engines singing a formidable, synchronized song. Lily's heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She couldn't place the sound, couldn't comprehend its scale. It was too vast, too overwhelming for her small understanding. Then she saw them. Around the bend in the road, a dark, churning wave emerged, a river of steel and leather, flowing with an unstoppable momentum. It wasn't just a few motorcycles. It was an endless stream, stretching back as far as the eye could see, a formidable, disciplined formation. They moved as one, a single, living entity, their chrome glinting menacingly in the morning sun. Each bike was a beast of power, each rider a figure of imposing presence, clad in dark leather, their faces often obscured by helmets or shadowed by the brims of their caps. Hundreds, then thousands, they came. The street, usually quiet and familiar, was suddenly swamped, choked by a seemingly endless procession of roaring engines and hardened men. It was an army on wheels, a tide of rough angels, their collective presence an undeniable force of nature. The air throbbed with their power, vibrating with a raw, untamed energy. Lily stood frozen, a tiny, insignificant figure against the backdrop of this overwhelming spectacle. Her blood ran cold, her breath catching her throat. Fear, sharp and visceral, seized her. This was not a coincidence. This was an invasion. Her mind, racing, scrambled for an explanation, but found none. Had she done something wrong? Had her small act of kindness, months ago, somehow led to this terrifying retribution? The thought, illogical as it was, became a cold certainty in her terrified young mind. The other children, who had been walking ahead of her, scattered like startled birds. Their laughter died, replaced by gasps of fear and panicked shouts. Parents, who had been waving their children off, froze in their driveways, their faces contorted in expressions of disbelief and horror. Doors slammed shut, windows were hastily curtained. The entire community, usually so insulated in its quiet routines, was plunged into a state of collective terror. They saw only the menacing leather, the glint of chrome, the sheer, overwhelming numbers. They saw outlaws, a threat, an invading force descending upon their peaceful town. Lily, alone in the middle of the street, felt the weight of their fear, their judgment pressing down on her. She was utterly isolated, a small, fragile target in the path of a perceived storm. The roaring wave of motorcycles continued its relentless advance, drawing ever closer to Lily. Her small body trembled, her eyes wide with a terror that felt too vast for her to contain. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for an impact, for a confrontation she couldn't possibly comprehend. The sound was deafening now, a physical assault on her senses, vibrating through her very bones. Then, with a sudden, breathtaking precision that defied their raw power, the leading bikes came to a complete halt. One by one, in a ripple effect that ran through the entire, impossibly long line, every single engine was cut. The thunderous roar, which had filled the entire world just moments before, vanished, replaced by an absolute, profound silence. It was a silence so dense, so heavy, that it felt louder than the previous noise. The only sounds were the distant chirping of birds, now timid and uncertain, and the frantic pounding of Lily's own heart. From the very front of the formation, a single, imposing figure dismounted. He was tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a worn leather jacket that seemed to absorb the light. His face, shadowed by his helmet, was unreadable. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards Lily, his steps measured and powerful. Every eye in the silent street, every fearful face peering from behind curtained windows, was fixed on him. Lily, her eyes now open, watched him approach, her terror a cold knot in her stomach. This was it, she thought. This was the moment of reckoning. When he reached her, he stopped, standing directly in front of her. His sheer size dwarfed her small frame. He slowly, carefully, removed his helmet. Lily gasped a small, involuntary sound. It was the biker from the gas station. Stone. His face, though still hardened by life, held a surprising gentleness in his eyes as he looked down at her. He knelt, bringing himself closer to her eye level, a formidable man humbled by a small child. And then, in a gesture that sent a ripple of astonishment through the entire street, he bowed his head. Immediately, in perfect, breathtaking unison, every single biker behind him performed the same gesture. Hundreds, perhaps 1,000 men, all bowed their heads in a silent, profound display of respect. Then, just as silently, they removed their helmets, holding them reverently against their chests. The morning sun caught the glint of their chrome, the sheen of their leather, but their faces, now visible, were not menacing. They were solemn, respectful, and filled with an unexpected reverence. Stone's voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, but it carried clearly in the sudden, heavy silence. "Little one," he said, his gaze unwavering as it met Lily's, "you fed me when I had nothing. You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me hope when I thought I had none." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the vast, silent brotherhood behind him. The Iron Brotherhood repays its debts, and a debt of kindness is the most sacred of all. Lily's terror, which had gripped her so fiercely, began to melt away, replaced by a wave of disbelief, then awe, and finally, an overwhelming, cathartic relief. Her small shoulders slumped, the invisible weight that had pressed down on her for so long suddenly lifted. Her eyes, which had been wide with fear, now brimmed with unshed tears. This wasn't an invasion. This was something else entirely. Something miraculous. "We heard you needed a little help, little one," Stone continued, his voice softening even further. "We heard some folks weren't being as kind to you as you were to me." He stood, his gaze sweeping over the astonished faces peeking from behind curtains, over the bewildered children gathered at the edge of the street. "Today," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "we walk with you. Today, we show everyone what loyalty looks like. Today, we show everyone what kindness truly means." Then, with a subtle nod, Stone turned to the street. He gestured to a group of bikers who had pulled up a trailer, its sides emblazoned with the Iron Brotherhood's insignia. From it, they began to unload an astonishing array of materials: new lumber, gleaming shingles, buckets of fresh paint, bags of groceries, even a brand-new, brightly colored bicycle. It was a cascade of hope, a tangible manifestation of their gratitude. As the other bikers began to fan out, moving with a surprising efficiency and discipline, they didn't approach the school. Instead, they surrounded Lily's small, faded house. Tools appeared as if from nowhere, hammers and saws glinting in the morning light. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with the sounds of purposeful work. The rhythmic thud of hammers, the whir of saws, the quiet commands of the bikers as they began to dismantle the old, rotting porch steps. A team of bikers, their hands surprisingly gentle, began to unload crates of fresh, healthy food onto Lily's porch. Another group, their faces serious and focused, moved towards the sagging roof, their movements practiced and precise. Others began to strip away the peeling paint from the house's exterior, preparing it for a fresh, vibrant coat. It was an orchestrated effort, a symphony of skilled labor, all directed towards one purpose: to transform Lily's world. Lily watched, her small jaw slack with wonder. Her mother, who had rushed out of the house, her face a mixture of terror and utter bewilderment, stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. She touched Lily's hair, her fingers trembling, unable to utter a single word. The entire community, who had been hiding in fear, slowly began to emerge from their homes. Their initial terror had given way to a stunned disbelief, and now a dawning comprehension. They watched, transfixed, as the formidable bikers, these men they had judged so harshly, worked with a tireless dedication, their hands transforming Lily's dilapidated home into a beacon of hope. Their prejudice, born of fear and stereotypes, shattered like fragile glass. They saw not menacing outlaws, but an army of rough angels, united by a sacred code of honor. When the school bell rang, signaling the start of the day, Stone turned to Lily. He extended a hand, large and calloused but gentle. "Come on, little one," he said, his voice a soft invitation. "Time for school." Lily, her heart overflowing, took his hand, and then, surrounded by hundreds of silent, watchful bikers, she began her walk to school. The entire brotherhood formed a protective phalanx around her, their presence a formidable shield against any future unkindness. They didn't speak, didn't cheer. Their presence alone was enough. The other children, the bullies included, watched in stunned silence, their taunts silenced, their cruelty exposed by the sheer power of this unexpected display of loyalty. Lily, who had always walked alone, now walked with an entire army. The transformation of Lily's house was completed with astounding speed and efficiency. By the time the final school bell rang that afternoon, the faded house had been reborn. A new, sturdy porch, painted a cheerful sky blue, welcomed visitors. The roof, once a patchwork of despair, gleamed with fresh shingles. The peeling paint had been replaced by a warm, inviting yellow, and a small, meticulously tended flower garden bloomed by the front door. Inside, new appliances hummed. The pantry overflowed with food, and the worn furniture had been replaced with comfortable, inviting pieces. It was no longer a house groaning under the weight of forgotten dreams. It was a home, vibrant and secure, filled with the promise of a new beginning. Before they left, Stone knelt once more before Lily. He pressed a small, intricately carved wooden bird into her hand, its wings outstretched as if in flight. "This," he said, his voice soft, "is for you. May it always remind you that kindness, once given, always finds its way home." He then pinned a small, polished metal patch, bearing the emblem of the Iron Brotherhood, to the lapel of her coat. "You're one of us now, little one," he declared, his eyes twinkling. "Always." With a final, collective nod, the bikers began their departure. They mounted their machines in perfect unison, their engines purring to life, a low, contented rumble. They rode away in a disciplined, respectful procession, a river of steel flowing back from whence it came. As the last bike disappeared around the bend, its roar fading into the distance, Stone, at the very end of the line, glanced back. He raised a hand in a silent salute to Lily, who stood on her new porch, clutching the wooden bird, her face radiant. Lily's new reality was a dream made tangible. The bullying ceased, replaced by a newfound respect, even awe, from her classmates. Her mother, freed from the crushing weight of debt, found a lightness in her step, a smile that reached her eyes. The house, once a symbol of their struggle, now stood as a testament to the profound power of a single act of kindness. Lily, no longer invisible, flourished. She continued her quiet acts of compassion, her small, gentle spirit unwavering. She understood, with a profound clarity, that the kindness she had shown had not only saved a stranger, but had, in turn, saved her. She often visited the gas station, leaving a small, carefully wrapped sandwich on the very spot where Stone had sat. It was her silent offering, her way of passing on the kindness that had been so generously returned. Her story became a legend in the town, a whispered tale of rough men with hearts of gold, a stark reminder that appearances can deceive and that true honor often resides in the most unexpected places. It was a story that shattered prejudices and built bridges, a testament to the enduring truth that the smallest act of grace can unleash the most monumental wave of gratitude. Lily, the quiet girl who once walked alone, now walked with the indelible mark of a brotherhood's loyalty, a living embodiment of the simple, yet profound, truth that kindness, once given, always finds its way home. So, the next time you see someone struggling, someone overlooked, someone who might just need a small piece of your heart, remember Lily. Remember the power of a single sandwich. Remember that the greatest gifts are often given without expectation, and that the echoes of kindness, once released into the world, reverberate far beyond what we can ever imagine. Be kind, for kindness, once given, always finds its way home.